What up, Unstoppables? I am on site in Phoenix, Arizona at Restaurant Systems Pro and Serve. I'm here with my man, Fred Langley, and we're about to dive deep into the world of Restaurant Systems Pro. Fred, what are you going to show us today?
I'm going to show you everything, and it's a lot, so we're going to break it up into pieces.
Nice.
Too, so you don't have to sit here for 2 hours and go through all of it to try to find what you need. We're going to break it up and organize it for you so you can come find what you need so we can serve you well.
Awesome. Well, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so we're gonna jump into probably the number one thing that every restaurant has to do is budget, to set a plan for success. If you don't set a plan for success, you're not going to achieve it. You have to have it set out. And I'm really proud of the budgeting system we have. It's actually one of the first software tools that we built in the desktop version, where you'd put your disk into your computer and download.
Man, have you guys come a long way.
Some people out there probably have never even know what I'm talking about.
Remember when it was cutting edge? You're like, wow, we are so advanced.
Software on a CD. Yeah. So anyway, so back in the day, we did do that. That was one of our first ventures, and it's because it's one of the most important things a restaurant can be doing. So we'll start with that, with step one, with budgeting and what that looks like. So we're in our system here. I'm going to log into an example here. So we do have a fake restaurant that we use. I'll jump into some real restaurants too if I have some restaurant examples where there's real-time data and I have permission to share. We'll do that. So this is a fake restaurant that we created. That's an old restaurant that David Scott Peters used to work at back in the day. He was a manager at, and so we have that from day one that we created as our example system. So in the system built in, one of the things, we used to have our Budget Creator Pro as a separate software, and now it is built into the system, and that's actually more convenient because it's connected to the system so that we can have a big picture goal for your restaurant and then have systems that run around and are attached to the budget and where you can delegate down from big picture goals to writing a host schedule.
Okay.
And break that down.
So the way that this layout right here, this dashboard on this left hand column over here, are these literally just all the systems in the suite of tools?
Yep.
Is that how you think about it?
Yep, exactly.
So,
there's systems and subsystems within each section there. So all of those, like even if you click up here and we're navigating, you just got labor systems here. And so within labor system, there's a whole bunch of different systems that we have for you, from retail systems and prime cost stuff. And this is a really cool one. We talk about all of our coaching stuff where there's like resources that you have that you can download. You can see it's downloading a whole bunch of stuff. So we have like our catering systems and forms and checklists and training programs and recorded workshops and core value, writing your core values and how to write it, and all this training is just a resource for all of my customers that lives in there. We have our dashboard here, and we're actually working on our dashboard to change some things here. This is one thing I'm really proud of here, is there's this group training that we do daily, and that's where we go on every day, and the links are here, and you can even see we record them. So even if you're not able to make, you have a question for support and you can't make, you have a catering, you have to take your kid to soccer practice, you have something, you can just send a question into support and it will get answered live on these trainings that happen every single day. Yesterday we had like 30 or 40 people show up to the training, and we just had multiple coaches go in there and take care of everybody. So it's working out really well. You don't have to wait to schedule an appointment with a coach or anything like that. You can just jump right in there as well. Another thing I'm really proud of, and we're gonna test it out live right now, is there's this bubble down here, and this bubble here is, I'm gonna say hello. Oops, I chop better than I type. So I'm literally going in here. We asked you to put like your restaurant code and all that identifying stuff in here, but I'm testing it out with my team. We have cubicles all out there where there's somebody that is out there to answer it, and we're usually really good about getting in here. And when this is being answered, it's not some sort of chat bot. So I'm gonna let them know it's me now.
I assumed it was an AI that you guys were using.
No, that's actually a real person. Okay. And then I don't know who it is, so I'm going to say who dis. So we have that. Yeah, they're answering It's Jeff.
It's Jeff.
It's Jeff.
Okay.
So Jeff's back there, and so we have it. If there's multiple people asking, it goes from desk to desk to desk to desk.
Okay, that's
so
cool.
that the coaches can make sure that we're hitting it too. It even notifies them on their phones, and
Awesome.
so we just really have it set up to be able to show up and give support, because all these systems they could be difficult, and so we want to give the support to be able to utilize the tool to its best ability. Yeah.
What is the core value we serve?
Serve them well.
Serve
and them as restaurateurs.
Yes.
And that's what we do. So we'd actually, as Eric's seen, we have our core values on the wall there, and by me taking a big marker and writing over the top of them, serve them well, it doesn't cancel those other ones out. It just emphasizes that our overarching, hi Eric, there we go. Our overarching core value is to show up and serve the restaurant industry at a high level too. That's our overarching goal.
So speaking of high level, any other high level things that you want to go over just to get the big picture and before we start diving into each one of these individual systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get into everything. The overarching thing is that there's a lot, but you have the support and training to go with it. We have excellent onboarding to where you get the resources to learn it all. It's also, we don't charge you an arm and a leg for the onboarding too. It's actually nothing. When you become our customer, you become our customer, and we show up to give you the support you need. We have daily trainings that are happening. A part of our restaurant mastery program is not just like you guys have heard me talk about it, and we offer it on the podcast. But one of the things that it also is a training ground for your managers. There's turnover in the restaurant industry. You have people that move on, that go open a new store, and you have a new manager taking place. You have you're growing. You add a manager. You have a manager that quits and leaves, and it's like, and a lot of times you're just stuck with your
That wasn't a fart.
Long legs. That was not a fart. Excuse me.
That was a mic boom swinging.
So yeah, my big feet over here. So so a lot of times what happens is it becomes a hassle. Like, oh great, now I got to train them all on all these systems. Yeah. Well, guess what? We do that for you, and so you can just put your managers into the training. A lot of times they have a good foundation because they've been using it as employees. They've been using the scheduling system as employee. They've been using checklist systems and employees and inventory stuff, and it's just a matter of them starting to expand on that knowledge and get into the numbers a little bit. Yeah,
I love it. Let's get into it.
Okay, so I guess real quick here on the dashboard, there's some cool things that we've added here where there's anytime a new product goes into your system, it's right there for you to be able to see. And then any price changes that are happening in your products, it'll go from the top price change down to the smallest price change over the last 30 days. So that's right there on a dashboard for you to be able to see that. And those are important things to monitor. It's by percentage, so let's say that I have a case of avocados goes from $50 to $53, right? That's a $3 price change. But then I have pork butt go from $1 a pound to $1.20 a pound, right? So if we do it by percentage, because it's important that I know that's a 20% price increase on that pork butt versus, even though it's only a $3, even the $3 is more than the 20 cents on that case of avocados, right? So that 20 cents on the pound of pork is a lot more of an impact on your business than the $3 for the case of avocados, right? So it's all by percentages.
So if they exceed that 20% increase, will it show up here? Is that what's going on?
So watch here. So it's kind of it's over here. How do I see it? I'm gonna create some space on this. We're on a small screen here, but here it kind of goes here, and that's showing the percentage change all the way to the right there. So that's a 50% price change. It went from $10 to $15, so it's a 50% change.
So all the items on this list
are by percentage. Yeah,
were changes that happened.
Yeah,
do you get push notifications on top of this?
So you get daily email with a summary of all your price changes as well too. So it's right at your fingertips, and then you can see it right on the dashboard as well too. So what that means is anytime you buy a product, that product is coming into the system through invoicing, whether it's EDI with a vendor, whether it's the scan and using the AI technology to scan the invoice, or if it's just a weird one and it's a real person having to read it and input it. Those price changes are recorded automatically. It updates recipe costing cards. It updates inventory automatically. You don't have to do anything but scan your invoice.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah. And it's recording all that data there for you. Too. So, I always want to stress, kind of the top items that give people the biggest bang for their buck. So, when we do that, kind of start there. And so, like I said, like budgeting is like that one thing that is going to, like, setting a goal and setting a standard and where you're at is the important thing. So one thing that's cool about this is we talked about in the network, or we talked about me going on weekly, maybe like analyzing your P&L and all that. Well, that's something that is one of the first things we do for every client that we bring along is we analyze their P&L.
Okay.
We set a budget standard that is, we're not worried about the numbers. We're just looking at recording where you're at today. And then we do a meeting with you to set some goals on where we can take you in steps. It doesn't happen overnight. Like the restaurant business, when we get people to 20% profit, it's not just one thing that gets them there.
It's not paying a monthly bill.
Yeah.
You can't just pay for Restaurant Systems Pro and have it just like work magic. Like I like to say it's the guide wire through the obstacle. It's going to give you the framing and the path to take to do the things.
It'd be equivalent to paying for a trainer and then not going to the gym with the trainer.
Right.
I mean, it'd be you're like, okay, go. Why am I not losing weight? Well,
exactly. Okay, keep going. Do your thing.
Except for the trainer doesn't give you ways to simplify. You still got to do the full hard work. Like we make some of these hard things a lot easier.
Right.
So there is that benefit there.
But it's also like you're showing people the right way to do the exercises, so you're getting the biggest ROI on the effort.
Absolutely. And so setting goals, I mean, I don't care what you're doing. If you set a goal, you're more likely to achieve the thing, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what we're doing here. So this is like a summary of the budget that you're seeing in these little tabs here, the way we have them organized. It's really cool. You'll see in my existing clients that have been with me a while, they'll build pro formas for potential restaurants that they're going to buy. And they'll have all kinds of different budgets for like, maybe I'm going to buy this restaurant. Let me do a budget to see if I want to buy it. I like the lease on this. Let's plug in my concept with this lease and this square footage and what does it look like and what do I need to do to make this investment work for me? So you'll see a lot of like projections and pro formas built in there as well as direct operating budgets for their restaurants. So here I'm going to go in and edit this budget here. So we're going to go and view and edit the budget, and it's going to load up here. We're in Chrome right now, so it's operating in Chrome. Restaurant Systems Pro works best in Chrome. This is showing a budget with actuals, so I'm actually going to uncheck the actuals and kind of start from the beginning on this. And at the top, you can see we have a yearly target for this restaurant. This example restaurant here, we're looking at about a $3 million restaurant. And then you'll see we have different sales levels that are happening each year as you go across the top, right? What we'll do is with the restaurant
each year or each month?
Each month for the year. Yeah. So there's the January, February, March. It's what we'll do is when we take a new restaurant on, they may not have books. And so we'll just go, okay, well, let's pull your POS numbers from that month and let's at least start with sales at the top and go right on down your budget. And we'll start pulling your bills and get all that. And then we'll get your books caught up eventually. So that you can pay taxes, right?
Yeah. But when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Right now.
Yep. So that's exactly what we're doing here. When we start off, we look at your categories and we set this up. This is kind of where we give you a suggested chart of accounts for your restaurant. We're not big sticklers except for a few things that we're going to say, hey, this is one way you have to do it. And this goes into if we're going to be analyzing in the network, analyzing P&Ls and going in there. I guess if you're listening to us at that time, probably go to the network if you want your P&L analyzed, and we'll do it. I'm going to add in there too that anybody that goes in and gets their P&L analyzed in those sessions, that will actually build you a budget. And even if you're not in my software, we can export this to Excel and you'll have a budget for your restaurant and new targets too. So we'll add that too, because I think they go hand in hand. Yeah. What's good of analyzing it if we're not going to do anything about it? I'm big on action and taking action on that.
And as we're recording this in May of 2024, we literally just announced this partnership in today's recording on the podcast, and we're figuring it out. Full transparency, like we don't know exactly the order of operation and how to get on a list to I think my dream is that it gets so busy that we're going to have to have a list.
A waiting list?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So anyway,
if we do that, I have a whole team of people that can do the same thing I can do.
All right, beautiful.
So that's pretty cool, right? So that's definitely helpful. And we're good at doing them. We've done a lot. I've done thousands and thousands of these. And so it's really, really second nature to us. When we look at this, So we're looking at the mix. So here's how the sales come in. These percentages here, you're looking at the mix. So this 80.5% that you're looking at right here, this means that if you did $10,000 in that night, that you would do $88,050 in food sales for that night. So that's your mix of sales as they come in. And then we talked about how this is one of the things where we stand firm, because sometimes we'll look at these and the restaurant owner will have just like deposits from the bank as their sales. So they just have sales, or they'll have it to where they'll have food sales and catering sales, and then they have, it could be different things where they just broken out to where sometimes they'll show sales tax there, and it's like sales tax doesn't belong on an income statement or P&L. It belongs on the balance sheet because that's a liability. You collect that money, it's a liability, and so sometimes what people will put it in as revenue, and it's not. We don't want to calculate your food costs or revenue off sales tax that you collected, right? So those are the things that we'll clean up on a chart of accounts to make sure that people are going to get a good report card for their business. Essentially, a lot of people look at their P&L as just a way for themselves to pay taxes. We want it to be a report card on how you're operating that'll give you feedback on what you need to do better and how you can operate to do better. And all the systems tie into that.
It's your pulse.
Yeah,
it's literally the lifeline. It's the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
Are we healthy today? Are we not healthy today? What's the P&L say?
Right. Exactly. And so that's what we're doing here. And so when you're looking at this, we have all of these revenue centers. Okay. So when I click on cost of goods sold down here, you're going to see that we have corresponding cost of goods sold center for every revenue center. So if I have a food sale, I have a food cost that corresponds. If I have a liquor sale, I have a liquor cost. Now, sometimes restaurants will make the mistake in this area and they'll say, hey, I have meat purchases and produce purchases and dry goods purchases or catering purchases or all these different things. And one of the things I like to do to teach it is like, okay, let's say I'm selling a plate of chicken wings, okay? When I ring that into my POS system, that is creating a food sale in my system. And sometimes people make the mistake of tracking revenue as like appetizer revenue or entree revenue, when really I want a report card for my business. So if I'm using heavy cream in ranch dressing and I'm putting in mashed potatoes, well, I'm using that same ingredient in entree revenue and in appetizer revenue, and just as an example, right? So we want to be able to have our costs associated with the revenue. So an example of chicken wings, if I was looking at poultry and dairy and dry goods, well, I would generate revenue with that sale of food, but I would have dairy costs in the blue cheese, I would have poultry costs in the chicken wings, I'd have dry goods in the spices and maybe the Frank's Red Hot that they're using, and I'd have produce and the celery and carrots. So I have all of these different cost centers that are reporting. There's no proportions that will tell me if I'm doing good or bad on those costs, right? Poultry might go up, but it maybe just because the cost of poultry went up, not because I'm buying more. Maybe I just started selling more chicken sandwiches or more chicken wings. And I would think that I was doing bad on my cost, but I'm just selling more of that item. And so I'm not necessarily doing bad.
So you want all the ingredients associated with the transaction of that certain menu item.
Yep, exactly. So food is always food. The example too is like, remember I talked about catering. We don't have catering sales and food sales separated, because let's say I'm doing some catering, right? And I have a party, I have a $2,000 party, and I'm going to go off site and I'm going to do that party. Well, let's say we make mashed potatoes and we serve those same mashed potatoes in the restaurant. Well, I'm not going to get into cost accounting where I say, oh, this portion of this case of potatoes is going towards those catering sales revenue costs, right? And this portion of the case of potatoes is going to go towards restaurant sales, right? We're not going to get into that unless you start doing about $1 million of catering. Then cost accounting can be worth it, where you have separate inventory for catering, separate purchases, all that. But most of the time when a restaurant's doing catering, they're all using the same products that are on the walk-in for the same menu. And if you start to try to get to where you're trying to count how much of a case in my books of potatoes went to catering versus food, you just give up and you're not going to be able to accomplish your goals. So when you look at this, we're looking at liquor costs against liquor sales. I can track on you see the difference between, we have draft beer and bottle beer.
Yeah.
On every invoice, I can track every keg that I buy very easily, right? And then I can track every draft beer that I sell in my POS system as well. Like wine sales, I've seen this before. I've seen every example you can think of, but where somebody said, hey, I have wine by the glass revenue and wine by the bottle revenue. on my P&L. Well, when I buy a case of wine, I don't know if I'm selling it by the glass or by the bottle at that point, right? It's not until the sale happens I know I'm going to pop open and sell this by the glass or anything like that. So when that happens, we want to just have wine purchase against a wine sale. So wine by the glass and wine by the bottle will be part of it. And when you start costing it all out, you can come up with the ideal costs on all of it. There. So when I'm looking at this is important. When I'm looking at this 26% food cost budget here, this is only this 55,384 is 26% of 213. It's not 26% of the 265 top line. Each category is its own percentage. So when I see 19% liquor costs, it's 19% of the 12,000 in liquor that's projected to be used there. Okay.
Got it.
You'll see that this is red. Whenever it's red in our budgeting system, that means it's part of prime cost. So prime cost is the measure which we measure all restaurants. It could be different for every restaurant, though. Prime cost is the same.
So you're talking about these items here all being red.
They're red. Yeah, that means they're prime costs in our system. And I could look at a pizzeria, and the pizzeria might be 20% cost of goods sold, 35% labor, because we have all the labor that's going into producing it and everything that's out there. It's still a 55 prime cost, and it still works. But then I could have a steakhouse that's 40% cost of goods sold, but because it's a $100 steak that cost me $40 to put on the plate, my sales are really high, so that means my labor would be lower, right? So I could have a 15% labor, 40% cost of goods sold, still 55 prime cost. That works in my equation, right?
Got it.
So a lot of consultants out there will say, hey, you're supposed to be a 30% cost of goods sold, and if anybody ever tells you what your food cost should be, it just shows they're really not an expert in the industry. It's each individual restaurant, their food cost should be for what their menu is, what their concept is, what their pricing is against all there. So it's different for everybody. What is the same is prime cost for everyone. And that's a good measure. Too, what's cool about that number too, this is kind of outside. I'm getting outside the software a little bit here. I know. But outside the software here, but I was reading a book, and it's a real page turner, but the analysis of of financial statements by written by Warren Buffett's daughter about how her father chooses.
Yeah, you've mentioned that a couple times.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I mention it because it just when Warren Buffett backs up the work you're doing, then it's there. And what he said was that 45% gross margin creates wealth. And 55% prime cost is a 45% gross margin. And so what we are teaching in restaurants, one, I saw the proof in the pudding, but just like, Warren Buffett agrees with us on this as well too. So
awesome.
So we go through this. This is all those categories. Then we look at payroll, and this is where we start getting into break-even point calculations and things like that. So the second part of prime cost here is that we have salaries and labor to look at. And that's where we start getting in where the software will calculate break-even point. In my teachings, I'm not going to get into it now, but I teach the basics of calculating break-even and why break-even is so important. What's cool about our software is it just does it for you automatically. I do teach the math behind it and the concept behind it in my trainings, and so it's helpful in understanding it. But the software does do it automatically, and what you're seeing here is we have these fixed costs as we go across here, right? So you'll see that there's management salaries and there's monthly salaries that are the same no matter what, okay? And then you get here, we're looking at line cooks and dishwashers. All the hourly labor is percentages, right? And so if everybody's looking at this, don't think like, that says line cooks are 10%. That's what my restaurant's supposed to be. Like we talked about with Prime, it's different for every restaurant. I'll have restaurants that are 5% labor because this is off total sales. And what if my mix is 45% food, 55% liquor, right? It's going to change the amount of kitchen labor that I'm using, right? So that's an important thing to understand. Don't look at this as a standard of where your restaurant's supposed to be. It's just an example of budgeting. And what we do is we start to look at where you're at and get to where you need to go.
So this 10% is saying that 10% of your total labor expense is going to line cooks.
Yep.
1% of your total labor expense is going towards dishwasher.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, if you're wondering, like I'm going to show you something in a minute. See how this is not like 10% of this would be 26,540 if I'm looking at the math directly. I'm going to show you in a minute why that number is actually not showing that. It has to do with your actual numbers that come in. Okay. It'll change based on the actual numbers that come in. So if anybody's looking at that going, wait a minute, that's not 10% of that number. If I go here, this is 10% of this number, but I put in some actual numbers here, so it's changing it too. I'll explain that in a second. But we target and budget, like these are all our budget targets. We use your history to predict your future, and we start to look at efficiencies and how much they're getting paid. Like it may be different, the efficiencies. If you're in Florida versus the West Coast, it's, $18 an hour minimum wage, and you have cooks making $25 an hour in some states. You might go to Texas and they're at the peak end, $18, $19, $20 an hour. So yeah, it varies. So we have all these targets that you'll see, those are all red. Sometimes we can change it. So you'll see here how these are black. We can either say, hey, you're an owner. How do you right click on a Mac? There we go. I figured it out. So if I'm going here and I want to change this back, I'm going to go, all right, there. I changed it to where I'm an owner salary. And this is for owners that don't have to be part of the day-to-day. They may be getting a salary in their restaurant, but they're not a key turner. They're not responsible for being there. And some people are like, I don't really know. Like, I'm there every day, but do I have to be there every day? Like, I'm leading my team. And the way you answer that is you say, hey, if I was to leave my business for 6 months, would I have to hire somebody to replace me? If the answer is no, you could probably not count yourself in prime cost. You're not part of production. You're still there leading your team. Your salary's in the budget, all those things. But if the answer is, if I was to leave for 6 months, I'd for sure need to hire somebody to replace me, then your salary is part of production and you need to be included in your own prime costs there. So
great advice.
So we help with that and getting it set. That's part of budgeting and helping people navigate those sorts of things and setting the targets. Down here, we budget for taxes here. There's other things in here, some of that are blank, but 941 taxes, that's a very important part of restaurants. And it's actually not a fair part of the restaurant business. So like I have all my employees here in the building. I have, I'll pay them 8%. On my payroll taxes. That'll cost me 8%. So if somebody made $1,000, then I'm going to pay 8% or more on that check. So let's say I have $1,000 employee here and $1,000 employee, a server at a restaurant, let's say. Then that person goes home with a $750 check. There's the employer portion of taxes taken out and the employee taxes that are taken out of that, right? So what happens is when those taxes are taken out, the employer matches those taxes to the government. So now that employee cost me $1,250 and they went home with $750. Okay, that's just normal business, which a lot of people don't think about. Restaurant owners think of that, but a lot of everyday people don't think about that employee just cost $1,250 and they're only going home with $7. The government made $500, they made $750, and they worked all this time, right? So the next part that's really difficult is, let's say I made $500 in wages. I made $500 in tips, $250 in wages. So I still made I made $750 in tips, $250 in wages. So I made $1,000, right? But I already went home with that $750. So now I have a $0 check, and I still pay taxes on all. The company still pays taxes on all those tips that you earned. So that's why you'll see here a budget of like 15% of payroll for payroll taxes. And now there is a thing here, and where I have our in-house CPA, we'll get it, where you can actually get a tax credit on those extra taxes that you pay as a restaurateur. So, send me an email, fred@restaurantsystemspro.net. We'll send you the information, and you can get some help with that.
But in order to get that tax credit, you need to be able to track and have these systems in place.
Yeah, you do. Now, your payroll system will be able to track it, but it's an important thing to know that you can go get that money as well. All right, so we're going to go through here real quick. I'm going to go through operating expenses really quickly. You'll see that we go through here. You'll see we have fixed expenses and variable expenses. A quick rule of thumb in here is I want your rent to be between 6 and 8%. If it's not, then it's going to eat into our potential profit. If you're, that's where we're at too. So you'll see that we have some of these as semi-fixed expenses. So you'll see I have electrical as fixed. That's because, if my electric bill might change every single month. It's not exactly fixed, but it's not changing based on the number of customers. It's changing based on how much I'm using my AC because of the weather, right?
Got it.
But things like credit card processing, you're going to find are... like right here, credit card discounts. We have those in as a variable expense. Those will go up and down. The more sales I do, the more credit card processing fees I'll have.
Got it. So when I'm coming in here, am I manipulating all these numbers, or like who?
So this is hard. So the things that are hard that you'll have to be done one time, As a service, we do them for you.
Got it.
Okay. Things that are repeatable that have to be done all the time, we make sure that we don't do those for you, and we teach you really well to do them, right? Okay. So updating your budgets, we'll get those started. For every single person we work with, we do it for you to get it started because it's hard.
Because this to me is intimidating to work this all out.
Yep. That's one of the things that makes us a true SaaS. A lot of people say they are, but we truly are a software as a service, and that you get way more than just a software. You're getting the coaching and help to go with it too. So all these things, like you just provide us some numbers where you're at. If you don't have books or numbers, we meet with you and walk through how we're going to get them there. So you have all these expenses in here. We go down and we predict your bottom line. You can see I've changed some numbers in here, so I'm going to refresh this, and it will refresh the numbers, and we start to look at a budgeted bottom line here. And when we go here, we can expand this out, and it's going to give me some more information. All right, so we click this bottom line right here, and we can scroll down, and we have a lot more information here. Okay, this will open up and give me like what my prime cost is. You'll see I told you 55. That's a 54.82. When you click on this, it gives you your net profit cash running total. I'm actually going to be meeting with a restaurant owner this year that's struggling right now with paying their bills. So I'm actually going to build one of these, but it's going to be 52 weeks. This is 12 months here, but it's going to be this same program in 52 periods. So he's literally budgeting every single week because he's in crisis and needs to make sure that he's managing that cash. This net profit running total will be basically reflecting what his bank account will be, and you can use it as cash flow to predict your bank's bank.
Now, off screen, you can't see it. There's a team of people working who are doing data entry now.
Yep.
So if I were the minimum to get the Restaurant Systems Pro software where you have all these systems in the back end, that's $299?
$399. $399, yep.
But if you're like, the idea of entering data all day, like you don't have to do the data entry. There's another service on top of that, or is that included?
Yeah, so that's what they're doing over there. That's only $300 a month to have a real person in there working on your invoices and getting them in there.
Okay.
And that is where, if you have multiple restaurants, it goes $399 to $999 to $99 for each additional. The invoicing, it's real people looking at it. A lot of the other invoicing companies out there, it's all 100% technology. What happens is things get messed up if it's 100% technology. You gotta catch that was like, oh, even though the vendor sent that as the ground beef as a case this one time when normally they send it by the pound. Well, now I can't have ground beef that's $75 a pound because it was entered in. That product was entered in, by the case instead of by the pound, right?
Okay.
And so there's a person reviewing that. We do have the AI technology. We do have the EDI connection to your vendors and all that, but it's to make sure that your data stays up to date and correct. We do have a person there reviewing each of those too. You can see that she's got invoices pulling up on her screen, and that they're making sure that data is correct before it goes into your systems there. So we have all this information. The biggest thing now is getting to this part here where I just click this button and the actual numbers come up. And this is where we could import your actuals can be imported from QuickBooks. So if you're in another accounting software, your numbers could be imported into here. This is called, there's a thing here that other systems don't have. It's called flex budgeting. And what that means is why I was talking about earlier, while this cost of goods sold number was a little bit different. You see here that this, let me just change this to make this, I'm going to just change the number here to two. Oops.
I don't think you wanted $2 in there.
No, let's do 200,000. Two more. There we go. Okay. So now we have 200,000 in sales, right? So if you'll immediately see how this changed to 52,000, the budget, it's because after the fact, if I had done 300,000, it would give me more money to spend, which makes sense. If I did more than I expected, my kitchen manager should have bought more food. So this is this is a better report card for how you actually ran. Every other system out there, especially QuickBooks, that's only fixed numbers, and the restaurant's full of variable expenses. And so as you go through your expenses, you need to know what I should have spent based on what I did do in sales. What should my labor have been based on what I did in sales? If it's just based on this fixed number, we don't want our success or failure to be dependent on how well we predict the future.
Yeah. And this is a lot of profit first from Mike McCallow's school of thought baked into the software.
Yeah, it is. And for us, we did this before we met him, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, we're doing this. It may not be separate bank accounts like what he teaches, that you're putting everything and separating out, but we are giving you all those segment things, which actually makes sense for a business when you're delegating it.
You're allocating cash flow, and whatever's left over determines your operational expense and determines your growth. So I always say people and cash flow determine growth. So do you have the people to execute the job?
Right.
Do you have the money in the bank to buy, or to get the people, and to
allow them to do their job and make buying decisions.
Yeah, purchase the assets to keep going. So
kitchen managers shouldn't have to come to me and ask for money to go to take care of it. They know where they're at. If they need to go outside of those parameters, then that's when they have to come.
This is your budget. This is what you have to work with.
Yep, and you can freely work within these budgets. If you start to go over it, what happens is we catch it in real time. So if I start going over my spending budget halfway through the month, normally people are waiting 6 weeks later to get the numbers back from the accountant and go, oh gosh, darn it, we lost money in that month. What are we going to do about it? This is in real time. If you're overspending immediately on that purchase order.
And what I love about this too is, like, I think about open book management, right? Like, how easy does this make open book management? Hey guys, our food sales were 200,000. If we get you can see exactly how you start manipulating these numbers. You can start affecting your budget, and then but I like how it's like, if you want to you can see if your liquor sales are down, or you're not pushing the draft bottle, or your bottle sales are down. Like, you can literally, I don't know. I just think it's so important. It's just like that idea of open book management, but by line item, not necessarily line item, but by category.
Absolutely. And there's also, like you said, the open book management, but sometimes people are really uncomfortable with that, right? So, but we have this variance report here, okay? And when I'm looking at the variance report, I can actually slice and dice this report based on somebody's level of responsibility, right? So let's say I'm maybe meeting with it's a new kitchen manager. We don't need to, we want to share these numbers, but we don't want to share the whole thing. Even if it's not that we want to keep them secret, sometimes it's overwhelming to just see it all, right? And it could become difficult. So if, let's say I'm meeting with a kitchen manager, I can go, okay, I'm going to share the food sales, the food cost, and I'm going to go to look at dishwashers and line cooks and prep cooks, but I don't need to share the rest of the front of house labor, right? And then I can go, well, all this rent and all that's not really part of their purview, but I can go, all right, okay, they're purchasing these items, right? Maybe they're in charge of that and smallwares and glass. This is what their level of responsibility is, right? And so I can create the items based on there, and maybe I don't need to share the bottom line there. I'm an advocate of actually sharing it, but not everybody there. But so you can slice and dice it. But I am definitely an advocate of being open book when it comes to that stuff. But now I can generate a report that's based just on that person's level of responsibility, and that's pretty cool in there too. So. That is an overview of budgeting. You can create copies. You can create certain scenarios where, hey, what happens if I lost $1 million in sales because I know that the road construction's coming in? What's that going to do to my business? What happens at my break-even point? What do I need to do about that? You can stay ahead of those things. What happens if I add the patio and I think I'm going to add 600? It's going to cost me this much, but I think I'm going to add 500,000 in sales. What does that budget look like? And you can create all just by hitting like save as, like you would any document. You can create copies of it and go from there and create different scenarios there.
Beautiful. So we covered budgeting, Fred. Real quick, tell me what else you're going to take us through without getting into any detail. Just list all the things you're going to touch on next.
So we're going to touch on recipe costing cards, the details of them and the application of them. We're going to touch on inventory. We're going to touch on connecting our labor budgets to that big picture budget, so weekly labor budgets.
Got it.
Then scheduling, so we can compare to that, and then how to analyze within the shift. Then analyzing efficiencies and labor budgets, and more.
Got it. So what immediately comes to my mind is this idea of what gets measured gets managed. And the first, I think why you have such an impact on your clients and their prime costs is like you just give them like a magnifying glass and like this like comb to to literally see exactly where all the money is going. And then I think it all starts with like having accurate costing.
Yeah.
So we saw the budgeting. Now we're going to go into the costing.
Yes.
Take it away.
Yep. The second most important thing we can be doing after budgeting is recipe costing cards. Yeah. So we're going to go take a look at recipe costing cards here. I'm going to go in and, we're going to the recipe costing card here, and you'll see here that we have like all of these recipe costing cards done. You'll see we have batch recipes and item recipes. That's a really important part of the system. A batch recipe is a recipe that goes within another recipe and can be inventoried, right? So if I make a big batch of soup, that's going to go into my item recipe that would be a cup of soup, right? So if I might make 5 gallons of soup, the other thing I can do with that batch recipe is once that 5 gallons of soup is made and it goes on the shelf of my walk-in, that can be something that I can inventory as well. A lot of restaurants are missing that. They'll go, oh, my vendor set me up with inventory, or I have this spreadsheet. And then you look at those spreadsheets and those are all made up of the products that they buy. But most of the stuff is sort of like in transit. It's been made into mayonnaise has been made into ranch dressing. You have different ingredients that are going into all the sauces that are in there. And
where all of your pennies are going from when they land on your back patio or whatever, your back dock, to their journey into the ranch mayonnaise.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you're looking at, I'm going to get nerdy here, but there's a usage equation, or accountants call it like the cost of goods sold calculation. We at Restaurant Systems Pro call it usage, and that's where we show that we used up a product. Well, if I put mayonnaise and ranch dressing, I haven't used it yet, so I got to account for it somewhere, right? And so we do that. And so we get to true usage of product when we're comparing to what you actually bought and everything and what the POS says.
I love that.
I should have used, right? So here, item recipes, those end up getting mapped to the POS system. Each item recipe is going to connect to a button on your POS. And that button is going to show you like right, here, if I'm looking at an item recipe of 8 ounces of mushroom soup, it'll tell me if I sold 10 of those, it knows exactly how many mushrooms is in that 8 ounces of soup. It'll tell me how many mushrooms I should have used compared to what I actually used.
Got it.
So that's really, really super useful, down to the dollar and the item here. Okay. So it's really cool. You can, like, if I go into a batch recipe, you can see that this is actually haven't looked at this one here, but yeah, this is saying, hey, 8 ounces of salmon with diced bell peppers they put down there, and we have this batch recipe, and it's saying, hey, this is making one 8 ounce portion here, and you can see those portions in there, and you can break down portions and all kinds of things in there. If I go to, I'm going to go back here. Let's go to I think we have an onion relish here that Gregg likes to use. So Gregg's he does sales and he does demos and all that. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to find a batch recipe for a onion relish. Oh, see, I got a bunch of batch recipes for onion relish. So let me do this. I'm going to go into this all-American cheeseburger. Okay. And if you look here, I have a 5.3 ounce patty. I have 2 ounces of cheese. I have a ciabatta roll. You see here we have grouped tomatoes. What groups mean is, for us is, and that works for enterprise as well. So if I'm buying tomatoes and I buy tomatoes from 4 different vendors, I don't need to, once I put them in a group, I don't need to track which one from which vendor came in. It's going to connect the last purchase into the system there. Okay. So there's different things like that can happen where, that doesn't work quite perfectly. Let's say I bought 20 cases of Jack Daniels and put it on the shelf, and then I bought another, I got a deal and bought 1 case. Well, the cases of the 20 should override the one that I bought, right? But there's certain situations where mostly it's the last one.
So if you have 4 vendors, you buy tomatoes from each one of those 4 vendors. When you get a delivery and it's from a certain vendor, the system's smart enough to know that the inventory that's on hand is likely from the last vendor you purchased.
Correct. Yeah.
And then if you purchase from a different vendor the next time, it's going to go, and does it matter if the cost of those vendors, is it?
No, so it'll do the cost, the last price, and the last cost. And so even if I buy it from one vendor at 20 pounds a case and another vendor I buy it at 5 pounds a case, it's going to know what the right case size is too on my shelf as well.
One thing I am curious about, you keep on talking about like the significance of batch. So say like you're doing a chicken noodle soup, and you have all these different ingredients coming from all over the place, and now all those ingredients are combined in a 5-gallon, giant container in the walk-in. What is the benefit? Like the true, why does being able to do the batch recipe, how does that affect your bottom line?
So A good measure of that is an example where I was working with a client years ago, and one of the things that's important to me, I've told you this, whether somebody's paying me $3.99 a month, or I had a client in this particular case, they were paying me $10,000 a month to go into their restaurant and help them. And if somebody's not paying me $10,000 a month to go in their restaurant, it's very important to me that I make them more than $10,000. Right. I want to anytime we're providing service, we want to more than pay for ourselves. Right. So if we see a situation where there's that kind of money on the line, then we can go in and we want to pay for ourselves. Well, one of the things that happened was they were going into a 4th of July weekend. Right. And so we had just finished up the month of June, and the bookkeeper provided some books for their company. Now, what happened was June 30th was on a Thursday, okay? And then they were taking inventory every Sunday. So they were doing $300,000 in liquor sales in 3 days. Wow. Because it was like on the beach, 4th of July weekend, like the whole deal, right? So they go, and if you think about that, they're going to do about $300,000 in 3 days of liquor, like insane numbers, right? Well, just think about what the shelves look like on June 30th compared to July 3rd on Sunday, right? The way emptier shelves, right? Yeah. But the bookkeeper used the inventory from July 3rd for the end of June because that's the closest one that they had, right? So what would happen is we would actually want to use the June 30th inventory. Now, the thing that's really cool is our software will automatically, we teach to do weekly inventory. It'll automatically calculate what that end of month inventory is, so you don't have to do inventory twice in a week, which is music to your manager's ears. Yeah. So what happens is when you have a usage equation, the usage equation is beginning inventory plus purchases minus ending inventory, right? That's a math equation. But if I look at what is in real time, if I'm looking at my numbers for June, let's say, right? Well, everything that I have on my shelf June 1st is available for me to sell, right? And then I go through the month and I buy product. All the product I buy all month of June is available for me to sell. So everything on my shelf plus everything I bought is there available for me to sell, okay? Then we get to the end of the month. And everything that is still on my shelf, I did not use. Right. So I subtract that out of the equation. I did not use it. And what you're left is what you actually used. Right.
Okay.
So in the case of this example I'm talking about, if they use that July 3rd inventory, that inventory was like $25,000 less on July 3rd than it was on June 30th. So they actually reduced their profits by $25,000 falsely by using the wrong inventory number.
Got it.
Right.
So in the case of the soup, if like in that example, say like you still have product from the last month sitting on the shelf in that 5-gallon container.
Yeah.
And unless you use all that going into the next month, it wouldn't be an actual reflection.
So let's say that chicken soup was worth $100.
Okay.
If I don't count it in inventory, then my usage is going to be $100 more.
Right.
And it will say that I use it even though I didn't use it and it's sitting on the shelf.
So it might not be in the original packaging that it came to you on the the dock, but when you pull that out of that packaging and you put it in the soup, it's still technically on your shelf.
Correct.
Got it.
Sometimes that can show up at big time, like where people will they'll only inventory like the whole steaks, but then they cut steaks.
Yeah,
and that needs to be the yield, and it's a different price per pound. And
I see this being an issue in batch recipes for cocktails with more and more people going to batch recipe. You're not going to dump out the booze that you didn't sell the night before.
Correct.
You're going to roll that into the next night. I'm assuming it's going to be shelf stable.
Yep.
What if that's like 10 gallons of vodka? I don't know the numbers to be accurate with. I'm not a bartender aficionado, but if you got like 5 gallons of vodka sitting on the shelf that was on last month's whatever ledger, then you want to make sure you're accounting for that. So.
Now, where that really comes into a point is now when I look at how much vodka I sold in my POS system, if I didn't look at my true usage, it could be really off. Right. So like I like to use an example of like, let's say I had 12 bottles of wine on my shelf. Right. And then I got a case deal. Right. So I had 12, I bought 3 cases. So now I have 48 bottles available to sell. Right. Then if I had 30 bottles, let's say at the end of that period, well, I would have only used 18. The 48 minus 30 means I used 18 bottles of wine that week, right? So then I go to my POS system, and my POS system says I sold 17. Well, if I wasn't taking in inventory, all the information I would have is that I bought 36 bottles and sold 17 in my POS system.
Right, because it's not accounting for the backlog.
Yeah. And so you're flying blind. You have no idea where you stand. And so apply that to chicken wings and every single item you sell. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
And let's say I cut steaks, or let's say I bought whole raw chickens. Let's stay on the chicken soup. I bought whole raw chickens, but then I boiled them and picked the meat and made chicken stock and put it in the soup. Well, I still haven't used those chickens yet, right? And we like to say use to rather than cost of goods sold, because we hope that the way we use product is by selling it. That's the goal.
Right.
But it gets wasted, stolen, overportioned.
You
spilled,
used it, whether or not it got used the way you intended or not.
Yes, exactly. And so it's true usage. And when there's variances between ideal usage, which is tying your POS system to your recipe costing card, those variances will show up, and then you can do something about it.
Okay.
Right? Without inventory, you're flying blind.
Thank you for answering my question. We have a lot to unpack, so I don't want to
that's important. That's a really important question, though,
Thank
Eric.
you.
So, and it's like I have people tell me, hey, I don't really want, I want the results that you talk about, but I don't want to do inventory. And I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Then you don't want to own a restaurant.
Right.
This is a perfect example of this is a guide wire through the obstacles.
Yeah.
It's an accountability partner.
Yeah.
And this is what you got to do to make money. This is what you got to do to know your numbers.
Yep.
And I think it's hard at first, but you have to remember that once you develop these habits, it's just like putting pants on when you get out of bed.
Yep.
You don't think about it. You just go through the motions.
And you've heard early members say that, I think, where it just becomes the way that you do things now. It's not harder. It's actually easier.
Culture.
It becomes your culture. Yeah, exactly. So here we have all this layout. So there we talked about, we were there on groups tomatoes. Here, there's potato wedges. You can see that's a direct product from Cisco. Then bacon, that's a batch recipe. So it's another recipe within a recipe, because how do I buy bacon? I don't buy it by the slice. I buy bacon by the pound, right? So now we got to have a conversion recipe that says a case of bacon makes this many slices, right? If I'm using by the slice of bacon, right? And so those are things that you need to check. Now, when I'm in the software, if we're looking at the software, I can click this eyeball, and it tells me we said 20 pounds of bacon, 2 10-pound cases makes. Let's see here. If I go view, I can view the recipe and go through that. So we're saying, hey, this 20 pounds of bacon in this recipe makes 215 slices. And we've even made it to where it says, hey, we have these metal bowls that have 25. So you can completely customize this. So now if I'm inventorying, I can just count how many metal bowls I have and know how much bacon's there, right? So now I'm not doing inventory where I'm counting individual slices of bacon in inventory. And it's accounting for it's because it's a different weight and all those things too. So we use this breakdown of a batch to get down to the one slice, but we also know that a whole hotel pan of bacon is 215 slices, which is the whole two 10-pound cases.
Got it. And what you're looking to, the bacon slice batch, this is the recipe you're saying?
This is a batch recipe for getting down to a slice of bacon.
Okay.
But then I store it in metal bowls, and there's 25 slices in that metal bowl.
Got it.
And I
figured
that out.
An eighth pan or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. It was they put in there. So another thing where batch recipes come in, where people don't realize that there are certain things that are batch recipes, is I might buy cucumbers. Well, most of the time I buy cucumbers by the each, but I'm using them by the slice on the line, right? So I really want to know what I'm putting 3 slices of cucumbers. I'm very exact, right? But I got to cost out 3 slices of cucumbers. So now I can say one cucumber makes on average 25 slices of cucumbers, and now I know how much a slice of cucumber costs.
Got it.
And then as those invoices come in and the prices of cucumber change, it's all automatically connected. I don't have to do it again.
I love it.
Right? Here I can click on view location, and this will tell me I can just add this batch recipe slices of bacon to any one of my inventory locations, which are completely customizable. I've even had Hobbit Hole be as a inventory location, where that dark space under the stairs they call their Hobbit Hole. That's what that restaurant called it, and that's what it is named in the system.
I love that.
It's completely customizable. So those are in there. So now when I'm working in recipes, I can follow the path back to where I was working. We were looking at this American cheeseburger, right? But I just followed the path. So if, let's say that price of bacon seemed weird, I could inspect the recipe and go, oh, is this correct? And follow the path through it too. I can put links here. We actually have, we're on here and you can see it, but when you print these out and put them on there, we're actually putting these with our as we talk about tying this over to our POS system, we're going to actually be able to pull these up on our KDS system. So when you're in the kitchen, you have the KDS, it can also double as a recipe screen.
Oh, cool.
On there too. So, but now I can just take my phone, I can scan my recipe, and we teach you to upload them, right? So there's an ad there. But now, and we teach to do it on YouTube because it just optimizes it, and we're making a recipe here, right?
So you can scan this recipe card.
Correct.
And that will bring you to a video
of how to make your recipe. Awesome. And what we do is we actually have training on creating your own YouTube channel and uploading non-public videos, and you can only get to them by the link. So you have this whole training system in the background of your YouTube channel that's just there for staff training and things like that. And it ties directly into the software. You just put the links in there and the QR code's created automatically, and you can,
awesome.
So that's a pretty neat feature in there too. So like from here, that's where you would go, hey, I can generate the recipe card here. So now I have this recipe card, and you can see here that this is also, there's notes that convert it to how a cook makes it versus how it's costed out. Because sometimes how I cost it out is not how a cook's going to read it efficiently, right? I might say 4 fluid ounces of cream, when to a cook I would say a half cup of cream or something.
I love that you have a picture of it too, just because like this is what it looks like when it's put together.
Correct.
We put our lettuce and our onions and our tomatoes on the bottom of the burger, not on the top. That is in that order: lettuce, tomato, then onion. That is how we do it here.
I'll have old school restaurateurs go, I don't read a book while I'm making a burger. And it's like, well, nobody does that. We're not saying for you to do that. We're actually just creating a standard, a line in the sand that you can refer back to.
So if one cook was trained one way to do it, and another cook was trained another way to do it, and there's an argument of the right way, just go back to the freaking photo, man. Argument solved.
No argument to begin with.
Cement it. Like draw the like make it official.
Right.
Because drift will happen.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's what so that's an item recipe, and you'll see we have batch recipes within. You can see we have direct products that we can use, groups that are in there to keep it up to date. With Enterprise, there's basically super groups where you'll have a tomato, and in Enterprise everything's a group, because each store might be buying a different tomato, but that tomato's got to go in that recipe for the burger, and it is controlled from one parent restaurant, is chosen as the parent, and then all restaurants have that recipe in it too. So I could have 30 units and do all the recipe costing cards for 30 units, and then each individual store will have the correct one that they're buying in that store too, and even reports that compare which is the best price across the stores. Or if the vendor, sometimes there's vendor deals where they're supposed to be providing the best price, but it's hard to track, and it will track it for you.
How long has Restaurant Systems Pro Enterprise been available?
About 18 months.
Okay.
About 18 months, awesome. And really over the last year perfected. Yeah.
I love it.
Yep. So the Enterprise includes being able to run like budget variance reports and P&Ls across, where it can combine stores and areas, and maybe I have EIN numbers that have 3 stores. And so if I want to do taxes, I need to combine those 3 stores into one document. But running each of those 3 restaurants, I need those numbers separate, right? In accounting, you'd use like classes for that, but in our system, it's all Enterprise, and we can combine or add or subtract and put them in different areas. So that's recipe costing cards. There's more to it, where there's prep systems attached to that and things like that, but that's a good overview of them.
And what are you going to be talking about next?
Too. So talking about next, from recipe cards, we naturally go into looking at what our purchasing and what our usage is, because then we want to concentrate on the top 20% of what we're buying to make a difference in our business. So I'll look at that.
Awesome. Can't wait to get into it. All right. What is the next system you're showing us with Restaurant Systems Pro?
Yeah. So we're going to look at purchasing systems and items which lead into your inventory, but it also gives us some insight on where to concentrate your efforts in your restaurant. And so I want to do a quick show of how that happens. I'm in a real restaurant in here right now. This is Peter Sclafani's restaurant. He's been on an interview with you probably last August or so. I'm not sure.
No, I think it was almost 2 years ago.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, he was one of my first interviews. It was when we were in Chicago when Chris Schoenberger, say his name again? Schoenberger was hosting. I think that was
okay.
That was some time ago in the mansion.
Oh, that's right. You interviewed him in the mansion there. That's right. Yeah.
Sorry.
Nice.
The
Well,
listeners
memories.
We don't care about that.
No.
Get into the software.
So we have this part here that's daily paperwork. And so, Eric, I'm going to ask you, how often do you think daily paperwork should be done?
Daily?
Exactly. And our restaurateurs sometimes have a hard time with it. But invoice upload here is showing where Peter Sclafani's restaurant is on his processing. And you can see here, there on these not processed lists, there's no invoices showed up. So he's completely up to date on his invoices, and there's none to be processed right now. So that could be one of two things. Either he has been not doing their job and uploading invoices, which is as simple as opening the app, taking a picture, and it scans it in. But here it's going to show me the processed invoices. So any restaurateur can see like what's been processed. You can see here it's today the 7th, right? So you can see up till yesterday that all of these invoices have been processed in the system. So when I look at like, here's a Benny Keith invoice. If I click on it, you're going to see the image of that Benny Keith invoice, and there it is too. I can make it bigger and look at it too, but that's showing me the Benny Keith invoice in there. It shows the people on our team that have processed it, but it's showing all those vendors in there too. Now, when I want to see that processed invoice, it is going to show me in my invoice log. Okay. And so when I look at my invoice log, I can see these are those invoices that have been processed. You can see that Benny Keith actually sent them 3 different invoices. This one right here is a bigger one. It's $6,315. That's right there. If I click on this invoice here, double click it, it'll show me the accounting code of that invoice that's being processed. But not only is it showing that's loading up the picture of it, not only is it showing me the accounting code, but also there's this blue button right here that's showing me how all of these products came into the system. And anytime you can see here, this is the Restaurant Systems Pro purchase unit and the invoice purchase unit. So if it changes, it'll update the system and flag their email for that day, but also show you on the dashboard any price changes by percentage and rank them. So any significant price changes will show up. So all of those products are coming in here. You can see this was a big invoice, and there was a lot of things, and we make sure that it's all correct and it's in the system. And now I have a record of every purchase I made for that week.
And I love that you can tie the person, so whoever's doing the processing. I think that was on the previous.
It was on the previous page, yeah.
So like, there's accountability too. So if something goes wrong, or if it was not entered right, like you could follow up, and if there's a pattern of somebody who's consistently not. There's accountability baked in, which I love. Exactly. And so we want that, and we're very transparent on it. So Shelby is actually on our team or their team. Shelby is on their team. So Shelby on their team actually process the invoice. Sometimes it's people on my team, and then we can go from there too. I have people that are remote too, so I do know who my employees are. But here we have, we go through them. We have these invoices here. Okay, so when they get processed, they're in the system and they get processed. But a really important thing here is, you're talking about the 80-20 rule, where that applies to the restaurant business as well. And what you'll find on here is that 20% of your purchases are going to account for at least 50% of the money you spent, total revenue, total cost,
income. Yeah. So
say that again.
So 20, it's usually like not even 20% actually. The top 10 or 20 items will account for half of your spending in a restaurant. And it ranges on the restaurant, but 10 to 20 items will show that. We could count it here. I could do a whole export on here too. But what I'm going to do is I scroll across here, and I go to the end here. Oops, sorry. Wow. Here is the total right here. So if I click on that, it'll change them and rank them. So from least to most. So when I'm looking here, this is just for the month of May. I could actually change this date range and go back to the beginning of April here. Let me load on that. So when I do that, it's a lot of data with all the purchases, and it's starting to organize it, right? So now I'm going to go and look at let me scroll across. That's now, 36 days worth of purchasing. I'm going to look at what they spent the most amount of money on. I don't know how hard. And when I look at that, so see, this is a product that came into their system, but they transferred it from another one of their restaurants.
Got it.
So that's not the vendor, but they borrowed that, and they can actually say this white chocolate brownie that was sent over was transferred, and that one restaurant that it left got the credit, and then the other restaurant got the expense for that white chocolate brownie. And it's telling me that this product came from transferring it from another restaurant in there too. So that wasn't there before. So now the number one thing they spent money on in the last 36 days was this 1620 shrimp. Right. And so if I'm going to concentrate my efforts, it's going to be on that too. So you can get these from your vendors, but the problem is you can only get it from some vendors, like probably this New Orleans Fish House couldn't give them this report. But Inland Seafood probably couldn't give them the report either, but Cisco and Benny Keith could. So you have things here. There's a Capital City Produce. These smaller vendors can't provide you that reports. Your bigger vendors could give you a breakdown. A lot of times they don't want to, though. They think it's time to shop you, and they kind of fight back and go, oh, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know how to run that report. Descending dollar report? I've never heard of that. And it's like, really, in this day and age, you've heard of it. You just don't really want to provide it because it's what people use to shop vendors. So
got it.
Yep. This is another one like this. This is Cisco. This is saying that it was transferred from the other store. This Cisco one too. Those pork rinds there. So now they know where to concentrate their efforts, and that now I'm going to go make sure all my recipes are done for these top 10. At least in the beginning of the process, you want to do them all. It's very important. But you know where to concentrate.
So you're saying 20% of those items are the ones you really want to pay attention to, because if they shift a little bit in price, then they have the biggest impact on your cost of goods.
Yeah, and it's not even so much about the price; it's about how well you use them.
Okay.
I have a client that
no waste.
Yes, in fact, what you just spoke on is kind of a even restaurateurs they believe that their cost savings are going to come from finding a better price on things, and price actually is one of the way down the list on the way you can save on food costs.
It's having systems, processes, and training in place, so you're not making something 3 or 4 times, and you're not over purchasing, so you're throwing things away.
I have a client that's the best example of this. And years ago, what they did is they had a giant room. It's probably half not everybody can see this room, but it's a pretty big room. I'd say 40 by 20 would be the size of the walk-in, probably halfway down the middle. And in the middle of this big giant room, they had pallets of crab that they would buy frozen at the lowest price possible. And one of the things we did is we went through this principle, and this is where kind of a Mike Michalowicz Profit First thing taught me this. I thought about it before, but he actually conceptualized it, where you talk about if you have Parkinson's principle says that the increase of a supply will increase the demand proportionally, right? So as the supply of something increases, so will the demand. That's Parkinson's principle. And that, if you apply that to like an example, a tube of toothpaste, you use more toothpaste when you have a full tube of toothpaste than you do when you have an almost empty tube of toothpaste.
You take a longer shower when there is plenty of water in the earth, and not when there is a water shortage.
Yep, exactly. So, and that's where when Mike Michalowicz was talking about, he's like, hey, that's why you break up your bank accounts into smaller buckets so that you don't see this like big pile of money and then want to use it up, right? So you have it. Well, when it comes to this, same thing goes with your inventory. If I have a massive amount of stuff on my shelf, I'm going to overuse it. And with the example of this crab, what we found was, yes, they were getting a good price on it, but now the crab is not precious. It gets overportioned. A case could get stolen and nobody would notice. Right. And we switched them to fresh crab at more dollars per pound, but a better product, and they lowered their food costs by like 9 points, even though we're paying more for crab. But we were using the right amount.
Got it.
Yeah. And so it really is important,
Awesome.
The 9 points wasn't all from the crab. There's a whole bunch of other things that was into it, but it was a big part of it too.
Got it.
And not having the massive amount was there too. Parkinson's principle was in play. All right. So that is a really important report that can let us know where we're at. Now, if we the next thing is we go to inventory. Now we got to count all this stuff, right? This is a purchase report. We got to count the stuff we bought. So if I go to my inventory here, you talked about accountability. Now they are if I go back, they are a Wednesday to, what is that? There, let me go back to April 1st. So here, you can see here that they have a inventory 2 weeks apart here, right? So they have to get their May inventory in here, but you can see how there's different names attached to the inventory. Well, and you can even see Gina was coaching them. So even my team's name would be attached to an inventory, right? So if I was to manipulate inventory, I could make my cost of goods sold seem better, right? And so there's accountability and timestamps as to everybody who edited inventory and had anything to do with it. So there's accountability to the numbers that are in the system.
Got it. So as you're going, so if I were to go into this, if I would click right here, that would bring me into the...
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Now, you can see walk-in is their first location. So click the little arrow next to the walk-in, then we'll expand that out. And then over on the right, you're going to go to the count. So let's edit this count. We're going to change it from, this is basil, and you can see it's in a group. So whichever is the latest basil they bought will be the one that shows up there. But change the count from 1 to 2. Just go to count, change it to 2. There you go. Now, what we're going to do is
accidentally click 3.
It's okay.
That matters.
It does matter because we got to change it back. That was 1. I'm going to change that back to what it was there. I'm going to collapse the section. And whenever I do that, it will ask me if I want to save my data. All right. So I'm going to save that data. There was 1 basil in there. And I save it, right? And so what that means is I've edited that inventory, right? So when I go back to the inventory, and we're going to go back to last month.
I think you made it back to 1, though.
It's okay. The second one, not the first one.
Okay. So
when I go back here, and I go back to April, see my name? There's today's date. It's a timestamp exactly when I touch that. So if Peter calls me up and says, Fred, what are you doing? I was like, I was just teaching Eric some stuff in there, right? So now my name's attached to it. I'm logged in as me. My name's attached. I edited that, and I'll blame you.
There's no shady shit to be done.
Exactly. Yeah. You cannot go in there and so that's where, as long as managers aren't sharing logins, you're all good to go. And we teach not to do that. Okay, so I'm going in this restaurant. Now I can move this stuff around without messing it up, right? So I'm going here. One of the things that happens is restaurants are doing inventory and spreadsheets and different things like that. And we teach shelf to sheet. I actually first learned about shelf to sheet by reading Anthony Bourdain's book, Kitchen Confidential, way back. He talked about being an up-and-coming chef and going like, hey, this is dumb. Why don't we count this the way it sits on the shelf? And he organized his spreadsheets that way. And that was years ago, early in my career, where I'm going like, hey, I'm going to do that too. And I actually did that back in the day in the restaurants I was working and organize all their spreadsheets. But it was a complete pain to take a spreadsheet and organize it, shelf to sheet. It's really, really hard too. So now here you can see, as we go through this, you can see there's a barbecue sauce. That's a batch recipe that's in my thing. I'm counting it by the quart because it's in those containers with quarts. That's in there. I have my, dressing and coleslaw. I can drag this to be wherever I want it. So now I can easily organize my inventory, right? But I also have a lot of things here. So let's say I'm going down here and I have a lot of things in here, and this grapefruit, let's say I want it to be the very first thing I see. Well, I can just type the number 1 index number, that yellow button showed up there, and I can reorganize. That grapefruit that I did. So now my grapefruit is right there.
So if you're walking into a giant walk-in and you go from left straight back to the wall, then you're on the back wall, and then you're on the right wall. You can just basically organize it in the way that you come across that stuff. So you're just going in order. And
you can set it up the way that you see it too. So there's certain things like where if we can minimize having to put things on a scale, like if I know like how much a 6-pan of pulled pork costs, I can create an inventory item that's a 6-pan of pulled pork and just count how many 6 pans of pulled pork I have and do inventory faster like that as well. I'll also use that purchase report to make sure I'm the most accurate with my top 20 items on there.
What about like typically when you're coaching people to do inventory, is it a 2-person? There's 1 person counting, 1 person recording, right?
Yep, 1 person recording. It's even easier though because I'm showing you in the browser right here, but it's actually right in the app. You can do it right on your phone and just hit enter next, enter next, enter next. And it's all organized and comes up and pops up on your screen in the exact order that you have it here in the browser. So it makes it really easy. And then you can see here we actually have a way to turn connection mode off. So if I wanted to take my laptop into the walk-in, I don't need to be worried about connecting to the internet. It'll just store all the information in the browser. The apps will automatically do that. You don't have to do anything different to have it happen in your app. And you could just count. And then when you get back to the internet, it'll push it to the servers.
Nice.
There. So that's all in there for you. So to be able to do that in those different ways is really helpful and important. There's different things in here where you have calculators built into it, so you don't have to get your calculator out to add things up, and we want to make it fast too.
Love it.
The other thing it will do that I don't really know if we're gonna have time to show you that today, but we have order guides that it creates. and it'll take those order guides, sort it out by vendor, and give you an order guide to do your ordering exactly the way you set up your inventory. So it takes the information you've done from organizing your products in your inventory, sorts out by vendor, and you can just order shelf to sheet as well.
Wow.
Too. So now you're doing your orders in there, and it's just making you more efficient too.
So this is what I think they mean by learning how to do more with less.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's technology that can streamline process and make it so you only have to do it one time.
Right? Yeah.
And I don't have to say any more than that.
Well, doesn't it make it, like, if you think about it, now that it's set up like that, it's much easier to delegate to a less skilled employee as well, right? Somebody that maybe isn't as experienced as you in the restaurant industry. So many restaurateurs wear a badge of courage that they're the one that knows how to do everything, and they end up getting stuck doing everything. And there's people that work 80 hours in the restaurant business, but not every employee works 80 hours in the restaurant business, right?
I mean, we talk about the importance of systems. And you can go out and build your own systems on print out pieces of paper and stuff like that, and they could be great systems.
Yep.
But are they, like, you will never recreate likely something as a restaurateur better than what Fred Langley has created in Restaurant Systems Pro. So instead of going out as a restaurateur and trying to build your own system from scratch, take an existing system and adopt it and go way further.
The other thing too is, like, you're busy restaurateur. We talked about, we have training for your managers that you don't have to train them. We train them on all this for you,
right?
Like, ongoing with it. It's not like an extra cost or anything. It's something that we're providing each and every single day, and you can put them into these trainings and say, hey, go learn to do inventory. I don't have time to teach you, but we'll teach you. You know, So. So those are some good things. There's, it does more stuff too, but that's a good overview of it, in here.
What's the next system you're showing us?
So as we go through here, we're taking inventory. Knowing our true usage of product is pretty important, right? Okay. So getting into usage of product by product is really important. So
what are you showing us next, Fred?
Okay, so we just talked about inventory, and now we're going to talk about the application. And so we're going to look at these usage reports. These usage reports are super valuable in controlling your cost of goods sold. And so what you'll do is when you go in here, only inventories that have been taken will show up here. Okay. So when I'm looking at this, I can see that I have an inventory that was taken on the 23rd. In our system, only ending inventories are input. So when I look at this inventory that's on the 23rd of April, it will be my beginning inventory starting on the 24th of April, right? So my ending is my beginning always, and I enter it in. So if I do, my beginning is this ending on the 23rd, it will start counting from the 24th. And then ending inventory, it happened to be their work week is, it is Wednesday to Tuesday, and so this 30th will be the end of the week here on that 30th there. Okay, so the other thing I can do is if I do this file import, this is where we have connection to our POS system, and let's see if they've done it in here. I gotta hit search. Sorry. So if you look here, you'll see that they have a report that was the 24th to the 30th. This report came from their POS system. Okay. And what it is that's the POS system PMix of the product mix report that is connected to each recipe costing card in their system. And what that'll do is we're looking at each and every product that they're buying. We know the real usage from inventory, and we're going to compare it to what the ideal usage would have been if they executed their recipe costing cards perfectly.
Got it.
So we don't expect perfection, but we want to see variances.
You want to get as close as possible.
Correct. So I've pulled that report. I'm comparing that, and now I hit the load report. And if we look at the top of the report here, you can see they have romaine lettuce as one of the first things. Now, it's important that this is grouped because when I'm looking at this and we count, let's say I count a different romaine at the end of the week that I had at the beginning, it's going to mess the whole thing up if it was all in here by item, right? So I got to know that I'm buying romaine from different vendors. They purchased one case. So if you look here, I had on my shelf 1.26 cases. You can see it's a 48 count case. So they had 1.26 cases. They purchased one case, so they had available 2.26 cases of romaine. They had 1.4 cases left at the end. They did not use that, right? So they subtract that. So the 2.6 minus the 2.26 minus 1.46 gives me an actual usage of 0.846 cases of romaine. So they bought a case, but they only used 0.8 of a case of romaine because they had 1.4 cases on at the end of the week, right? That's that usage equation we were talking about earlier when it comes to inventory. So now they know their actual usage. Now we can see that something's off here because they actually underused romaine. So they could look at that and go, well, am I just under portioning? That's what it could mean. It could mean that they used a different lettuce in a salad where they were normally using romaine, and so they end up underusing it actually, because the actual is real life. Ideal is just based on the recipe costing cards what it should have been, and so they can go and inspect that. When we look at the variances, like the first thing is it gives you a variance by dollars, and I'll only put them $33 under budget, but now if I'm clicking on the variance here, it shows that they had $111 on, looks like it's some sort of soap, so that's no big deal. There's going to be no usage in a recipe costing of, you see how it's zero ideal? It's because they included some of this paper. So they're pretty good. They're really good. In fact, that's one of the reasons I chose them to look at, is they're really good about their items. So like here's one here, Dungeness crab. If you look at that, they started with 2.2, or no, where are we at? So it's a 5-pound container or can. Usually they come in like a can. They put them, seal them in a can. They had 0.385 of a can of a Dungeness crab. They ended with 2.23 cans, and they bought 3 cans during the week. So they actually used 1.15 cans. That was their actual usage. And you compare that, they only should have used 0.9. So they overportioned their crab in there, and it's letting them know that. Right. So these guys have it dialed in. They've been doing this for years. It's dialed in. When they found their usage in the past, they had big variances, and they've closed the gap to where they're very little.
So this right here will let you go, okay, maybe there's an issue with the process that we have for portioning out the crab.
Yep.
Maybe we're just using a spoon before, and what we need to do is get a measuring cup and level it off.
Yep.
So now, what this does is it brings your attention to the things that you would never be able to track before.
Never be able to.
Yeah. So now this is how you can really start to like manipulate and play with the numbers to get it. Your help me out with your projected with your actual.
So the actual and ideal. Right. Or sometimes people call it theoretical usage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like it's getting these all out on line items and drilling down so you can know when you're off, but it helps you. This is when you bring this is the power of open book management.
Yes.
So now you're looking at these numbers. You're like, guys, we're 0.9 or 0.962. What is this?
It's like
dollars.
That's of a 5-pound container.
Okay.
So they should have used 0.96 of a 5-pound container the way they're buying it.
But what you can do is you can pull your team in and say, we're not doing this right. Like, can you think of a better way?
Right.
So like now you tap into the mind, because they're the ones doing it, and they're like, every time sometimes I drop it.
Yep.
Or like sometimes like like little things like that they can.
So here, let's say we did drop it. If we go here, they have no waste on it, but actually you can see here there's chicken breasts on a waste sheet. If you put it on the waste sheet, it'll show up there as well.
Right.
So you enter it in the waste sheet, and it will show up like, oh, I may be missing that much, but I know that I dropped this much, and we've at least accounted for it.
Right.
And that will show up, and kind of, it doesn't change your variance, but it lets you account for your variance on the waste sheet too. So when you know it, so it ends up to be where you can kind of like figure out, and you can go back to the waste sheet and see what the reason was. It could have been dropped. It could have been like, hey, the owner took a pound home for the family and they put it on the waste sheet. Like, who knows what that is.
Anything else regarding the usage report you want to show us?
Yeah. I mean, just stories of people making big changes. There's one nightclub I worked with where there was Tito's vodka, I remember, and it was supposed to be 1.5 ounces pour, right? And they were going for a 20% pour cost, and their pour cost was like 28%. And you think like, man, 8 points on liquor, like how'd they get there? And honestly, it's just a 0.5 ounce of booze, because if let's say I had a 20% target and I poured 2 ounces of booze instead of 1.5 ounces, I would add 33% onto that, which would add about 7 points onto a 20% target, right? And so the full 8 points of liquor variance was based on only a 0.5 ounce of booze, which doesn't seem like very much, but it's so much. Yeah. It's a lot. And that's more important than getting a better price on Tito's, Right. So yeah, this is really, really, really helpful stuff when it comes to, analyzing your data and getting real-time information on it. And it's not magic.
It's discipline.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Absolutely. It's a big component of it. So you can see we have the weigh sheet in there. As you put that in there, there's prep sheets and importing. There's another one too. I'm not going to really spend too much on that too because you got to have a lot of data in the system. It's a thing called automatic pars where let's say I know that I bought 10 cases of tomatoes and those 10 over that time in the past, when I bought those 10 cases of tomatoes, I did 100,000 in sales, right? Well, in the system, we're doing sales forecasting. And so if I essentially know from my past that I'll use 1 case of tomatoes for every $10,000 in sales. If my forecast says $25,000, I need 2.5 cases of tomatoes to get through. If I have 1 on the shelf, then I need to order 1.5. System knows I'm not going to order a half case. I need to order 2 cases of tomatoes, and it does it automatically. So it'll auto create pars. I've had this happen where like, hey, my bar manager was sexually harassing an employee. I had to fire him, and I don't know how to do the liquor order. It's like, oh, no problem. Let's go into your system. We pull the history, apply the par, and we do a liquor order like that. And we don't need we take what's inside the head of people and put it into a system, and we can do the order, and anybody can do it. Now, that's not meant to replace people or devalue. It allows them to do more and work on more, right? Sometimes chefs think like, hey, I'm valuable because I'm the only one that knows how to do an order. And that doesn't really lead to great success. That leads to just maybe surviving.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Are we ready to move to the next
Yes,
system?
absolutely.
All right.
So that's an overview. So we just looked at cost of goods sold. There's some other systems in here that we want to look at, and those are labor systems. That's the other half of the big part of the equation as we kind of go
Prime
through
cost.
that. Yep. The other half of prime cost is labor. So as we look to labor, we start to see how our purchasing systems tied to those budgets. So if for cost of goods sold, we didn't really show that, but here we're looking at now. Here's Visconti's. When I go here, I have this right away. I have this schedule variance report, right? And so if we start to follow this through the natural progression here, let's see, next week is the 8th, right? So you'll see here that they actually have a budget where they have actually scheduled items, and then they have a budget that's for that. And you can see they're well under budget for that week. Could be that they're probably having a surge in business, which I know they're up in the north, and so they're having a surge in business.
So increase in income.
Exactly. So they need to adjust their targets, probably. Yeah. So when they're looking at this, well, that all ties back to budget and getting things in here right. So what happens is they do a labor allotment here, right? And so let's see if So now when we go and look at labor, what we want to see is that we're starting from big picture goals, and we want to break them down into small bite-sized pieces that our management team can execute on, right? So we're going back to the beginning where we were talking about budgets and setting goals. And so there's a couple things I want to check out here. So you can see here I have a budget here that's 424 to 521. So this is Solu, this is Peter Sclafani. He has targets that are periodic. So he runs a period accounting system, and so he has the budget. It can adjust to be period. Before we looked at it, it was monthly. So one of Peter's periods here is 424 to 521. So immediately what I can do is look at my daily paperwork, go into my sales forecast, and when we look at that, it was 424. He runs a Wednesday to Tuesday work week to 521, right? So we see that, and you see he's got 407,395.51 was his sales forecast. You can see that we've predicted his mix. You can see that, remember we talked about mix at the beginning, that applies all the way through. Now when I look at the budget, you'll see that budget sales forecast matches what the system is saying. So not only have we done a sales forecast by month, but we have it broken down by day as well, which ties into our scheduling and our purchasing and all that too, and adjusts based on actuals too. So we don't want to get in too deep on how it does that. That's part of our 60-day training. So that's in there. So, but you can see that matches. So when I look at the budget, there's some clear labor goals that have to happen here. So you can see here, he's got management salaries in here, and then he's got some labor by department here, and see how it's specialized is a little bit different than the one I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but overall you can see here we've labeled this labor allotment target, and you'll see that it's 26.69%. Okay. So now what management can do is they go to this labor allotment system. Okay. Now you can see here they have a budget for 5/8. Okay. I'm going to pretend that I'm going budget for 5/8. So I go and add a labor allotment, right? And we want this to be easy and to have good flow through and easy to understand. So I just follow the steps here. You are completing the labor allotment for what schedule? Well, I'm doing a schedule in the future. So they won't do another one till tomorrow, which will be for the week of the 15th, right? So when the 8th hits, they'll do forward to the 15th. But on the 1st of May, they said, hey, let's budget for the 8th of May into the future, right? So what they would do is they'd go, okay, I'm going to write a schedule for May 8th, okay? And I have this in here. And so on May 1st, the most current complete week they had was from 4/24 to 4/30. And so the system will tell you that or remind you of that. The most current complete week was the week previous. And what they do is they can pull, I think Peter's Toast. So we just hit a button and we pull all that data from Toast and it populates these numbers here. Okay. So it tells me what I actually did. They're punching it on Toast. All these are mapped out. We have all that data and it tells him what his actual labor is. Then we go to budget. And we have to, maybe we have the managers are in the budget, maybe they're not, but now I don't have to remember that. I just go to that budget and I can go, okay, the period that I'm in is 4/24 to 5/21, and you can see how it says 26.69. I click that button, and now I've got a budget target of 26.69. It will account for all my salaries, and what this does, without getting too deep into it, is instead of like looking at all these big complicated percentages, it just says, hey, here's how many hours you can schedule in each department. So once we have all that in there, I just hit calculate on it and it will tell me how many bartender hours I can schedule to make that budget that I wrote a reality.
Yeah. So you're giving a budget of hours, not a budget of
percentages. Yeah. And it's much easier for them to go and do
right.
that.
Like,
right?
Yeah, you start scheduling people out and you're seeing that number go lower and lower and lower. And now you're thinking to yourself, okay, well now,
right?
This is what I have to work
exactly.
with. Yeah.
So the 8th is tomorrow. So we go into the future. And this is the big difference of Restaurant Systems Pro is we actively try to control tomorrow. If I waste money on labor, the clock ticks, that money's gone. I can't go, hey, I overused a few hours last week, employee. Can I get those back this week?
Right.
But if I order too many cans of tomato paste, I can use them tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if now when I go to this schedule variance here, and I'm going to open up another tab here. I'm getting better at this already.
Using the mouse pad?
Yeah. So now I go look at next week. Now, here is if you remember I had budgeted 221 bartender hours.
Yep.
They actually scheduled 209. So now they write their schedules in the system. And it says, and it compares what they actually scheduled to what their budget is.
So they came in 11 points or 11 hours
under budget.
Nice.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have incentive to do this because if they're doing profit sharing or anything like that, open book management, they're like, well, do we really need to use the entire budget, or can we see if we can get by with less,
right? And be efficient without sacrificing and this is where in our bonus system we tie in like reviews and quality of service. We don't want to take away from our service, but a lot of times the efficiencies are there and we just can't see them sometimes.
I just had John Kearns on the show and he was talking about just the power of just staggering workforce. Like, hey, like let's look at the data.
Yeah.
When if we are a breakfast restaurant, do we need to have all hands on deck at 7 a.m. or can we schedule 2 servers? And then by 8:30, typically the sales reports, the data shows that this is when people start coming in. We'll schedule a third person, and then 15 minutes later, we'll have another person come in, where you can literally have people showing up at the quarter hour based off of the past, just to really.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what we do is we take it a step further. What we teach is we always want to have qualitative skills. And what you just described there is your qualitative skills to make good decisions for the business, right? It's your gut feeling of what is efficient and all that too. Well, we also want quantitative skills. And quantitative is what do the numbers say, right? Yeah. And so what we do is we help. If you're doing only qualitative, you're going to be going down the wrong path. Only gut feelings going to take you down the wrong path. If you're doing only the numbers, it's going to take you down the wrong path. If you take your qualitative and quantitative and put it together to make good decisions, that's where you're hitting a sweet spot.
Yeah, I feel like Nick Cirillo calls this trust and track. You got to trust. That's the qualitative, right?
Yeah.
You got to trust your gut. You got to trust the people.
Yeah.
But you have to track it on the back end. You
Absolutely.
can't just trust without tracking.
You got to know these things too. Like, oh, I can't send this server home because this server's green, and if the restaurant gets packed, they won't be able to handle it. Or this cook isn't cross-trained yet, so
no two servers are exactly the same.
So you got to tie that all in. It's
maybe
not just
at
numbers.
7 a.m. have your stronger servers on in case you get an earlier rush. They can handle it. Whereas if you have a greenhorn on, they're gonna be buried in the cold.
Or you run the numbers and it's the opposite. You say, oh my gosh, we're really over efficient. We need to add more people. Right, that happens as well with our systems too, because like here, we're not going to get into it here, but we have dollars per labor hour, which lets us track efficiencies. And this is giving me an overview by week, like a big we went to month, now we're looking at week, and then we'll go and look at it by the day too. And so we have some proprietary stuff that's called like the reverse labor system that not only tells you let me go take a look at it here. So if we go to reverse labor system, that all ties into this, right? So if I'm going to, what my overall target is for, let's say I'm even looking at the first here, right? So you'll see here that Peter has all days finished here except for Tuesday, which is the end of his work week, the way that he runs the system. Well, Tuesday, this is today. Of course, it's not in there, right? If I look at just Tuesday on this is going to tell me my necessary sales. So you can see here that he is trying to run a 19.67. That's from budget. So remember we put a 26.69 into the system? Well, it took the salaries off the top of that. And what's left over is for my variable labor.
Got it. So
after the salaries have been reviewed, because nobody can control that, they're a fixed number, right? So that's it comes right off the top. Now, what this does, and this is in our apps too, so managers can access it at their fingertips, is they go, okay, my necessary sales for today are 9,212. Now, what happens is in the middle of the day today, I don't know what time it is. It's in the afternoon, so maybe lunch service is finished, but most of the sales are going to happen tonight. It's for me, I may be running a 50% labor right now.
But by the end of the day, when all the new cash is in, it's going to be different.
Exactly. And even at 7 o'clock, I might be running 10% labor.
Right.
But I still have to finish cleaning up and do ordering and all that stuff that happens to close out at the end of the night. And so what happens is you go and look at your POS system, and I might have a 19.67% target, but at no point during the day at all am I ever going to be like at 19.67.
Until
really
the end of the day.
Until the end of the day. And so what we do is we flip that over on its head and we say, okay, if I'm going to be on budget, I need to do 9,212.60 in sales for me to be in budget.
So now you have a goal.
Now I have a goal of hitting 9,200 in sales, and if I do that, I'll pay for my labor.
Got it.
Right? And I could change it. Like if I go into the, let's say I go to line cooks here, I could even you could edit this in your app as well for the managers. But like, let's say I have and they'll overwrite this, so it's actually fine that I change it. But Arthur Robinson here, right? Or let me see, Andrew. Let's say Andrew, we got our printers going off for our POS system in the background. That's exciting, sweet noise to me. But let's say that Andrew right here was working till 1 o'clock, right? So my manager can create a plan. You can see earlier in the week, those are all the real punch times. But if I go, hey, 9 a.m. to like 1, let's say that, for whatever reason, we say, hey, who wants to go home? And then, Andre does go home. Right, and so we make it to where we can type it in, and he goes home 2 hours early. So remember, it was 9,200 and something, right? So I hit save in there. I just plan to cut him. Now it's $9,039 I need to do because we just made a cut there.
Got it.
Too. It also shows me that I've edited that. It's white for accountability. That's edited. What will happen too? Like if I look at yesterday, so I go to yesterday. On this, you'll see how it's all dark blue there. That's actually the real punch times have come in from the POS system. And then it will tell me like yesterday, based on what was actually worked in the POS system, it shows him that he's got 70, that he needed to do 7,500. His forecast was 7,600, but he did 73. So he was really close. He ran a 19.93 for yesterday, which is a really good Monday, right?
Yeah.
So, and those are the actual numbers here. You can see originally scheduled was 175 hours and actually worked was 149. So that's a gold star for my management team right there.
Yeah.
They actually used less hours than were needed, and they did about what they started to hone in on that. At the beginning of the day, the necessary sales would have been much higher based on the 175 hours that were scheduled too. We also have this part right here where you can easily look at that. So sometimes you're like, where did I do good? Where did I do bad? But if I'm looking at this week and I want to look at that Monday, I'm looking at bartenders here. It shows me like this person right here was scheduled 4 to 10. Well, they actually worked 4:06 to 10:52. So they went over their hours a little bit there. So you can kind of go through the whole shift and see like, where did I do good? Where did I do bad? And look back on that to see if you had a problem or if you want to repeat some good things that you did on there.
I love it.
Sometimes you find that you put a plan out, but then managers don't execute the plan. And what's the good of doing a plan if we're not executing the plan, right? So we kind of lay out a plan, but we all know the restaurant business. We got to bob and weave and make it work. And so we want to just keep people accountable to the plan. And, if I question a manager on it, it's not like accusatory. It's like, hey, let's talk about why this person worked 3 extra hours.
Let's talk about the numbers, not your actions.
Yeah, exactly, too. And it's very black and white and not confrontational or anything like that.
This is what we said. This is where we are. Let's find a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives really good transparency to all of it and all the details. It's really tough to go back and look this stuff up and find it. Like all the information's in your POS system, but how can we slice and dice it to where it's useful to make good decisions on and have a good dashboard for how we're operating?
Yeah, got it. Are we done looking at scheduled versus actual?
Yes.
In labor systems?
Yes. Eric, let me show you schedules. And this is where, when we built our scheduling system, it wasn't really to compete with Hot Schedules or Schedule Fly or 7 Shifts or any of those other ones out there. They're good in their own right, but we're creating our schedules from the big picture financials that we created. And so having the schedules on our system is a must for an owner to be able to judge and see if they're on track from the plan that they created. So it was a necessary thing to build. We built it in about 2015. And with that, we know that you need the convenience of your employees to be able to swap schedules on the app and to be able to request time off. And you see here, you can see that there's a pending request here. That manager has to do it. That's pending. This one's been approved. That one's pending. So and this is for, as you go through the week, where they're at with it. So managers will go and approve them. It's all easy. Like if they're swapping schedules, it'll ask the person they're swapping with before it asks the manager. We don't want to approve it. And then they're not willing to work for you and things like that.
Yeah.
There's also training systems and things which I can probably show you, coming up. Next, but the scheduling system is all in there as well, and it's necessary to be tied because all of this is tied to the financials.
Explain to me this rating.
So that is just for managers. Looks like they're not really using it. Someone gave Lauren a 1 star there on that. So if Lauren, you're watching this, I apologize on there.
So basically, this is a way to say like the managers saying like this person is.
So let's say let's say you had to write the schedule.
Yeah.
It would be really helpful if everybody had a rating in there. Because then you could make sure that Friday night isn't full of 1-star servers.
Got it.
Right? I got to have some 5-star people on my busy nights. They're working with my 3 stars in there. If I'm below 3 stars, I probably need some training to do on that. And, we can get in there and do it. Only managers see that. Employees don't see their rating on there. That's for the manager to have some breadcrumbs to where I can write a schedule if I know nothing about those employees, right? That's what systems can do for you, right? And it helps a new manager, it helps us train new people and get people in the systems more there. So that's just one of those breadcrumbs in there too. Availability's in there where they can, have their availability in there and the managers can see all that and they can do it. If you have multiple restaurants, you can see if they're scheduled in another store and not schedule them in 2 stores at once on accident, things like that. If they're multiple positions, it won't let you schedule them in multiple positions at the same time as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question.
Is that all things labor?
That's all things labor. Yeah.
Sweet.
So one of the things we just finished up labor and we're talking about labor, and it's one thing to say, hey guys, you need to schedule, 180 hours instead of 200 hours. And that's easy to say. Than it is to actually do, right? And the other part of that too is we also want to really be aggressive with cost of goods sold. There's a lot of emotion attached with our employee labor. We have to remember that they have families and rent and jobs and people that they need to take care of. And so we want to really treat how we're handling that labor with kid gloves. But one of the things that we can do to improve labor is with just systems that are outside of scheduling and budgeting. And checklist systems are the most basic systems that restaurants can use to really increase efficiency and make sure that people are on track with their goals. And one of the things about checklists is the biggest, most important thing with checklists is accountability to them. So here, I'm going to go over to Matthew Burnaby and show his. He told me I could share his checklist systems here. I think he was just starting to get into using them too. So you can see here that today, here's one that's been completed. You can see that there's a shift lead opening here that's in progress. They're not all there, but like this one's been completed today. As a manager, if I look at that, you can see that it was his manager, Cheyenne, went in and took time and temp logs on their refrigeration units, right? If they're outside of a range, it will auto notify anybody you set up to be notified, right? So Matthew's on his honeymoon right now, we talked about, right. And somebody, it could be that another manager or their maintenance person gets notified if a walk-in's out of temp.
So he can enjoy his honeymoon.
Yeah, we also are working with ThermoWorks of also tying in their digital thermometers to the systems where it sends notifications out to. Because right there for them, it's just kind of like emails and things that go out, but to tie it into the system and keep logs of it all is important too. In Canada, you have to have a record of your line checks, all the temperatures of sausage. You have to keep them every day, and so this makes it to where we can go from there and automate it too. So here you start looking at the questions. Like here's a bathroom closing checklist. Here, if I look at that, it'll show you like he's got it pretty simple in there. All the different questions. If I go, let me go to. I don't want to mess it up. So if I go to QFF here. And I look at these here, I can go like we have these walkthroughs, and these are examples of ones that we put in the system for you. There's a 116 question walkthrough, and this is like a building walkthrough that you could say, hey, I'm going to go do this building walkthrough, and we build this for you. And you don't have to build these. We copy them into your system, and you can just customize them to your parking lot and your thing. But it's everything to spot check your restaurant to make sure. And we have these set up as ratings, so you can get points and rate it. And is the sign in the bathroom clean? Are the mirrors and sink area clean? And then not only what the points are, but what the standard is that you're looking for. And you can walk through on an iPad or a tablet or a phone and do this. I say that because it's Android and Apple devices that it all works on as well. The other thing is if I go to, here we go. Let me go to another page here. And if I go to question examples here, right? So if I look at this, I can inspect this here, and this is an instruction example, and then I can have a check mark as a question. I can have a yes, no question. I can say, which employee. So you can have a drop down of employees on here. This is all can be done on the app. We made it to where it can be done on the tablet though, because if I have a bartender on the phone, it looks like they're texting. So they can pick up any tablet, do a checklist, and then also switch between employees really easily without having a complicated remember my login go. I get to switch it from employees really easy. So now it becomes a clipboard system. And what's cool about these is there's accountability built in. So like if the morning bartender checklist isn't done by 10:45 a.m., then the manager and the bartender gets text messages and notifications that, hey, you haven't set up your bartender station. We talked about tying in the POS system where if they clock out and they try to clock out and they haven't done their checklist, right, it'll remind them of all that. Well, that's all in here.
I love that.
And tied together. So, yeah, we also gamify it and do like rankings.
Rankings, what's that?
So like if I go to achievement settings here, this is where it does the gamification of this stuff, because is it really that fun and exciting here? So Brittany's coming here. So we have 328 users in the copper level here, and that's between 0 and 100 points of people doing these here, right? So you can see here like Katrina's at 90 points, and you can assign a point to a question. So like if you have clean the toilet, maybe that's 5 points. When wipe the mirrors is 1 point. You know what I mean, right? So you can establish different amounts to it. You can see here's the top. It's pink star because Brittany loves pink, and so she's the pink star, and there's 2 users. I'm going to bet that Brittany's in here, And you can actually, there's Brittany, and she's got 984 points because we always use her as a example.
So the way this works is as you're going through and you're eliminating tasks, you're getting points for those tasks.
Yes.
So at the end of a shift, you can see who's doing most of the side work.
Yes. Basically. And they can accumulate points, and you can say, hey, once you pass 1,000 points, I'm going to buy you lunch, or different rewards that you can do just to make it fun, and the leaderboard and stuff too. Nice. So, I mean, it's not always exciting stuff too. So the more fun,
maybe
we
it's
can
just
make
a gift card at the end of the month.
Maybe
got the most points.
Exactly. We have people do different stuff where they can do shift meal, shift drinks. You can accumulate them more, and we'll take you out to dinner or whatever. There's different prizes that they can do, or they
so you have your monthly prizes, and then whoever has the most monthly or monthly winners at the end of the year gets a vacation.
Yep. So those are cool things that we have in there that's nice to use. So the other part, that's checklists are one way to create efficiency. The other way to create efficiencies is great training, right? So in training here, you're going to see that we have training systems, and they're all tied in with our app. And I'm actually going to go to here. You can see we have training systems, and I go to this training dashboard here, and you can see here that we have how to clean the dishwasher as one of the examples here. So if I go into how to clean the dishwasher, as we look at this training, I can see that this person did the training. If I click here, that employee can pull it up in our app, and they can go through the training that is embedded video training, or you can put in put our training. So you can do word stuff that you read for training, pictures, and also videos in the training. And then they have quizzes and checkoffs that they have to answer after. And we provide all those questions and trainings for you as well. You don't need to create it. You can just edit. It's always easier to edit that stuff than it is to create it from scratch as well. We also sell it for our non-customers. So if people are
the way I'm hardwired, thinking about having to go into a system and create these trainings, I'll just be like,
our training. I think we have 16 books that are 100 pages each.
But if you were to give me the framework, if you were to create it and then show me what it should look like, and then I can take it and customize it for that, that's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And customize it for your restaurant.
Yeah,
every restaurant's a little bit different. So.
Does that wrap up scheduling and training?
Yes.
We're on checklist now. Sorry.
That's scheduling training. We wrapped up checklist. That's scheduling. That's training there, and that's in the scheduling app there. So that's all there. So here, if you look here, I have how to clean the dishwasher. I can log in. You can see we embedded this video. This will pull up in the app, and you can assign it to different employees to do it. And so I use this because this is Keely. You've interviewed Keely before. She's super organized. This is one of Keely's managers.
We're going to show y'all how.
And it's a whole training on doing that, and they use their embedded YouTube so that it plays efficiently. And there's the training.
Scrolls getting there.
So I could imagine this too, in the kitchen checklist, your daily prep. There's a video there to have. This is how we prep this certain.
And I can check off stocking my station even for my mise en place. So absolutely.
I love that.
So that's really useful. There's other things in here, there's loyalty benefits in there. We talked about credit card processing. We have analytics for if you're. So this is just basically giving you an outline of some ancillary systems that are all in here. There's manager log in there. It's a daily manager log that can be filled out. It's searchable. So if you have hey, was this employee late all the time? Now they're saying hey, I've never been late before, and I can look up and see if they've been late 15 times in the last year or something. If somebody's called out, you can track that. So it's a lot of human resources information that's in those manager logs. You can see how often the fridge is broken down by searching that manager log as a database as well too. So it also gets automatically delivered to everybody you say it should be delivered to every single morning in the email. So it becomes morning coffee reading for it. Even Robert St. John, I saw, was one of the posts because one of his managers got creative and wrote a little story in the manager log, and he reposted it. I'm like, hey, that's from our manager log, as his manager wrote a story about the shift because it was super slow or something, and so he wrote a creative writing exercise in this manager log, and Robert posted it. It was a lot of fun.
That's funny.
There. So, but other, there's lots of systems in here. I just gave an overview in the 2.5 hours that we sat and talked, and it's just a tip of the iceberg on all the things that it does.
Was that the last system we just looked at?
That's the last system that we're going to do. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, super stoked to sit through and go through this. I mean, it's something, honestly, we've spoken a lot about as long as we've known each other now for the past couple of years, and this was the most complete coverage of Restaurant Systems Pro that I've had the pleasure of seeing through. So thank you so much for helping me better understand what it all looks like in the back end.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers.